Hello and welcome to Friday Double Bill. This is Mayank Shekhar, I'm Fahad Samar, and we're going to bring you the best of Bollywood and Hollywood this week.
Of course. How are you doing, Fahad? Have you recovered from shackles yet? Or ham shackles yet?
Ham Shackle, where Sajid Khan is having the last laugh.
Absolutely,
at the box office.
Here's a film that on its first weekend collected rupees 40 crore. Now, anytime anyone in this country complains about price rise, all I'm going to ask them is, did you watch Hum Shackles? Did you pay 250 bucks for it?
Hey baby, what were you thinking?
But of course, this week we'll be reviewing two films and also reviewing a trailer. The trailer is of Mardaani, the films are Ek Villain and Transformers 4.
And here are the OMG moments from Ek Villain.
हर लव स्टोरी में एक हीरो होता है, एक हीरोइन, पर ये लव स्टोरी एक विलन की है।
तेरे ही गुनाह लौटे हैं, एक अजनबी के रूप में तुझे सजा देने।
Well, my oh my god moment would have to be KRK. That's Kamal R. Khan, a huge Twitter celebrity, has huge following and of course makes a lot of sense on Twitter. In this film, he gives us the reason why Indian men happen to be wife beaters, and according to him, the Indian middle class man, because he's getting screwed from the top and below by politicians, the public and of course the police, vents his frustration when he gets home to beat up his wife. I think it's a very solid argument.
It's really solid, and I'd have to say my OMG moment is also with the legendary thespian Kamal R. Khan, where he is the best friend of the villain Ritesh Deshmukh. Ritesh comes to KRK's doorstep, severely beaten by the hero, and KRK sizes him up and says, what you need is to be taken to the red light district of Miraro to witness an item number and then to pick up a feisty hooker. And the dialogue, of course, is Pehle dhulai aur phir malai. Truly Kamal ka dialogue.
Well, you know, the other one, of course, is his favorite, which is the 2 rupees people, which he says at some point. But, you know, on a good note, on a positive note, the other scene that I really liked a lot was the scene where Sidharth Malhotra, the lead actor, whether we call him anti-hero or villain in this movie, he has to rescue an inmate from a mental asylum. And he breaks open the door of the auditorium. What's playing in the background is the same scene from Shahenshah. There's Amitabh Bachchan there breaking the door open the same way. Of course, that moment has no relevance to the movie as such, and I think the film in itself has too many such lovely scenes which actually don't add up. They just look lovely for its own sake.
Well, I'm interested that you say that, because I saw great vision from Mohit Suri in that sequence, because when if I remember correctly from Shahenshah,
right,
Amitabh Bachchan enters a stable.
Right.
Over here, it's obviously a place, for the unstable. So essentially, I think he's playing with huge imagery and symbolism in this film.
Right.
Jokes apart, I think for me, one of the great things about this film was very good cinematography by Vishnu Rao, somebody whose father I've worked with extensively, the legendary cinematographer R.M. Rao. And it was a very interesting picturization of a song where the Sidharth actually beats up 20 gangsters in a shipyard.
Right.
But it's a single tracking shot. It's done to music, so it's got a lyricism to otherwise what would be a typically ghasa pita, dishum dishum sequence. So I think these are the kind of things that one really appreciates in Hindi cinema.
Well, getting straight to the review of the film.
Mohit Suri's Ek Villain is essentially old wine in a new bottle. Our hero is a Goan gangster's henchman, Guru, played by Sidharth, who reforms because of the love of a bubbly do-gooder, Aisha, played by Shraddha Kapoor. Aisha has resolved to save this angry young man's soul. So our hero is also a villain who has no compunctions about setting a rival on fire after dousing him in kerosene on the streets of Panjim, that too in front of his family. The couple sings a few songs, gets charmed by CGI dolphins, butterflies and peacocks, and then they get married. But the course of true love never did run true. Enter a psychopathic killer, Ritesh Deshmukh, who plays a lower middle class, chole-dwelling Maharashtrian whose wife constantly taunts him for being a loser. Ritesh finds catharsis for his frustration by donning a raincoat and gloves and then stabbing women who ridicule him with a long red screwdriver. Wonderful phallic imagery. Bubbly do-gooder Aisha is hurled to her death just when villain turned hero Guru has found a legitimate job. Naturally, Guru vows revenge and hunts down the real villain Ritesh. The film then unfolds as not ek villain but anek villains indulge in a cat and mouse game of murder and mayhem.
Well, the film, of course, is directed by Mohit Suri. If you purely go in terms of percentage profits or sort of investment you make in a film and the revenues you earn out of it, Aashiqui 2, his last movie, was the biggest hit of 2013. Clearly, there's huge anticipation with this one. There are those elements that we saw in Aashiqui 2 that exist here as well. Shraddha Kapoor is one of them. The second is the Dard Bhare Sufi songs that you can't but avoid. The film, I think, in terms of look, in terms of the sets, which are quite appealing, in terms of aesthetic value, is quite decent. I think the director is in good nick in that sense, in terms of craft, in terms of form. What it lacks is perhaps the writing. It's poor, pathetic piece of writing.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things about this film that I really appreciated was Goa being shot very evocatively, with a little bit of Mauritius thrown in for good measure, doubling up as Goa. And what's a Goan film without Remo Fernandez? Not this time as a guitar strumming troubadour, but in fact as the dreaded gangster Caesar. And Remo surprisingly acquits himself quite admirably, except in a couple of scenes where Caesar suffers a couple of seizures and is rather apoplectic. but outside of that, you know, Kamal R. Khan, Remo Fernandez, all these guys put in some great cameos. The girl who plays Ritesh Deshmukh's wife has put in a wonderful performance as a shrewish.
But you know, since we're talking about female actors, I think one of the things that I find incredible is Shakti Kapoor's daughter, Shraddha Kapoor. Shakti Kapoor, of course, will be remembered all his life for two great roles. One is Crime Master Gogo from, of course,
Andaz
Apna Apna, and the other one is a lesser known film but a bigger cult, that's Gunda, where he plays, I can't name his character here because I'm presuming the kids are watching the show as well. Outside of those two particular characters, I think, and he's worked in about 400 productions at least, his greatest contribution to cinema is his daughter Shraddha. I think she lights up the screen, and the story really revolves around her and this goon Sidharth Malhotra. At some level it's a romance, a very mushy romance in terms of how the goon becomes a good man. But I think what I found really weird about the film is that this is called Ek Villain, but it has at least 4 anti-heroes, 2 completely separate storylines which are not related to each other. I don't even want to get into how they link those 2 genres. And effectively, the second film that you're watching is a hardcore psychotic picture about a serial killer who hates screechy women, goes to their homes, uses a screwdriver and kills them. I mean, that is the kind of crazy Korean bloodfest, which of course has been taken from a crazy Korean bloodfest. Exactly. I Saw the Devil. Yes. Merging these two, I wasn't too sure whether I was watching Ek Villain or 2 movies.
Yes, I mean, I think that schizophrenic personality also is a little bit of Mohit Suri's own mindset. There is a schizoid personality at play here as a director and author. But I have to say that you know, that cloyingly sweet, terminally ill Shraddha, you just wish at some point she would die, but then she isn't dying, but then she dies.
And then she isn't dying.
And then she isn't dying. And so it goes, and so it goes, till finally it's all a merry mess at the end. So yes, I mean, unfortunately, very earnest performances, let down by a really vapid screenplay and some really middling dialogue. There's a point at which Kamal R. Khan, again, our clear favorite and the true hero of this film.
Leave him alone!
How can we leave him alone? How can we leave him alone?
Well, he should leave us alone, yeah.
Ritesh Deshmukh lounging in a pool on an inflatable raft, and he says, they've picked up this hooker, and he says to Ritesh, do you want to do a solo with her or a duet with me? It's this kind of stuff that...
So what's the verdict, Fahad?
Well, the verdict is a very charitable Dekho as far as I'm concerned, more so for the fact that there's really earnest performances all round, really let down by a very poor screenplay. But Dekho, फुर्सत से देखो.
Well, sadly, I beg to differ on this one. It was a big, hard decision for me to make between a Pheko and, of course, because there's some really lovely scenes, the songs aren't too bad, the performances are just about okay. So maybe television per dekho. I think then you can switch it off when you feel like, you can take a walk when you feel like. So I guess I'll go with TV per dekho.
So this is what we thought about the film, but let's see what the Desi Martini audience had to say.
Well, moving on to the Hollywood blockbuster this weekend is, of course, Transformers: The Age of Extinction, better known as Transformers 4.
Let's take a look at some of the OMG moments.
Bring it up! All the way! I don't think we can truck it off. I think we just found a Transformer.
Where is Optimus Prime?
This is a film that runs for almost 3 hours, and I was just wondering why director Michael Bay didn't just cut it at the interval and make Transformers 4 and release the second half next summer as Transformers 5. It is tedious.
What's your OMG moment?
That was my OMG moment.
Really? Well, I don't blame you at all, Fahad. Now, this is a movie that's attempting to blow your mind with every single second. I think with every minute they spent $1 million each, right? Because it's a 165-minute film, the budget is around 165 million. But here I'm thinking, if the world is, blowing apart, any second these guys, these midgets of human beings next to Transformers, or huge Autobots as it were, could be dying. And all that Mark Wahlberg needs to know is why his 17-year-old daughter is dating a 20-year-old guy. Like, really, man? Like, throughout, and it's a running joke through the movie if it's not even funny. So there was that, but I think in a positive way, the one scene that I loved a lot was, of course, that the tightrope sequence between two buildings. They put this wire mesh, and these guys need to cross, from one building to another. Now, if you're watching that sequence, it's the only thing that builds tension in the film. Otherwise, things are blowing apart anyway. But if you're watching that in an IMAX theater, and if you have vertigo, I think you'll have problems. And I thought that was one lovely scene out of a whole lot of scenes that made no sense to me.
Absolutely. I think, again, when you talk about the dynamic of Mark Wahlberg playing the father, you've got the Irish, good-looking, hunky boy, who wants to seduce his daughter, reminded me instantly of another sci-fi summer blockbuster, Armageddon, many years ago, with Bruce Willis playing Mark Wahlberg and Ben Affleck playing this Irish boy. And it's essentially the same story regurgitated. But please don't forget that this is a film that's been shot on IMAX 3D. It's introducing the latest in Dolby surround sound, which is called Dolby Atmos. So this, to my mind, is Hollywood at its absolute best in terms of technological advancement. It's got all the CGI, all the latest of technology, but at the end of the day, does it have soul? Without further ado, here's the review of the film. This is the 4th installment of the highly lucrative Transformers franchise. Instead of calling it Transformers: Age of Extinction, I suggest they call it the Age of Extension. Michael Bay has made 3 other Transformer movies and needed to inject fresh blood into an aging franchise. So this time, instead of Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, we get action hero Mark Wahlberg, good old Marky Mark, and a funky bunch of Transformers ranging from Autobots, Decepticons and Dinobots battle it out as Earth faces extinction at the hands of aliens and some evil humans.
Well, quite similar to how Bollywood has its 100 crore club or a 200 crore club, Hollywood has what they call a $1 billion club. And I think movies like these, movies like Transformers, 1, 2, 3, 4, are essentially made, one, to ensure that the toy manufacturers make their money, and then, of course, the fact that it needs to make, revenues from across the world, since more than half the revenues of most huge budget Hollywood movies come from outside America. This one is also set in Hong Kong, also set in China. At the end of the day, I think what we are getting is pretty much the same thing. Transformers 2 was the highest grossing film to win Golden Raspberry, right, which is for the worst movie every year. Transformers 3 was a $1 billion club movie. I think this is going to be both Razzie and $1 billion.
Oh, Razzie Dazzy with, and as I said, it should be Transformers 4 and 5 rolled into one because it's just so long at 3 hours. But it's interesting where Hollywood is going. The executive producer on this film is Steven Spielberg, and they all have such extraordinary amount of product placement in this film. It's not funny. From Dr. Dre's Beats, music players, to beer, to even Hong Kong landmarks like the Pangu Plaza. And they actually had a problem with the Pangu Plaza, the sponsors, and which is now known as the Pangu Plaza Panga, where they finally had to run down the entire cast and crew to appease the Chinese and do damage control. So obviously this is the way that cinema is going, and where Hollywood is headed, which is to all these huge markets which are still completely enamored by things that blow up. And don't forget the land of Godzilla and that sort of over-the-top cinema.
True that. I think one of the elements, that you mentioned, the fact that Steven Spielberg is an executive producer on this film. I mean, the thing that Spielberg seems to get right most of the times is emotional engagement with an audience. Clearly, that is not something that Michael Bay even aspires for.
No.
So, if things are just blowing apart one after another, here I'm thinking, is it supposed to make sense to me in some form? And of course, since the storyline is roughly about CIA that wants to now take on Autobots, there's an international company that also wants to manufacture them. I'm thinking, is this CIA story with Osama bin Laden? Does it have parallels? Can we draw some? And at some point I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. Can I just sleep for a few minutes? And I can't do that also because it's so freaking loud.
Yeah. No, don't forget this is Dolby Atmos, so there's no question. The sound is coming from you from all sides, including from above. So any thoughts of catching 40 winks within those 3 hours is a complete no-no.
Right.
Incredible. I mean, some of my favorite actors of all time, Stanley Tucci, Kelsey Grammer, are all embarrassing themselves here, playing human villains. This really embarrassing love track between Stanley Tucci and this Chinese actor called Li Bingbing. And, again, they just need to bung in elements of local actors in order to appease the Chinese.
True.
This is the way we're going.
This is the way the world is headed, and why not Hollywood? So what's your verdict?
I'm going to say it's a Dekho in the theater, but if you can, please IMAX 3D mein Dekho with Dolby Atmos Dekho, and submit yourself to that experience. Be prepared, go for a susu break so that you have 3 hours of non-bowel movement.
Well, I think, Fahad, you're being extremely kind out here. Here is a movie that's supposed to be a summer blockbuster, but lasts the entire summer. I would rather, put in my money in something that makes more sense. It's a complete, no doubt about it, Pheko from my side.
So that's a full-on emphatic Pheko, a very charitable Dekho from my side. But let's see what the audience had to say at Desi Martini.
Well, that was the review of Transformers 4. Every week we also give a quick take on the trailers that release on the internet. This week it's Mardaani.
इनका मेकअप ऐसे मत किया कर जैसे बच्चियां हों। उन हरामजादों को इनमें अपनी माशूका नजर आनी चाहिए, बेटी नहीं।
So obviously this is a film that could have been called Revolver Rani, but unfortunately Kangana Ranaut beat her to it. Don't you think, Mayank?
Yeah, well, this is Rani Mukherjee attempting a comeback as Mrs. Aditya Chopra now. It is a home production, as you rightly mentioned. The subject, of course, was dealt very beautifully by Nagesh Kukunur very recently. Of course, very few people saw that film, Lakshmi. Given the way this has been treated, at least going by the promos, a lot more people will catch this particular film.
That's right.
There's some raciness in it. It seems like a thriller. At the same time, you can tell that they're making sense. It's not just for the sake of it. Looks a little bit like No One Killed Jessica, but that's probably because, well, there is Rani Mukherjee and the setting is Delhi. There is something very natural about Rani Mukherjee's performances if she's cast well. I thought she wasn't well cast in No One Killed Jessica. It looks like it might be one of those films which she'll get appreciated.
Absolutely. I just think that some of those titillating scenes that we see in this movie aren't really there purely for titillation, and that, you know, the real spirit and soul of the film comes through at the end. I'm sure it's a responsibly made film with its heart in the right place.
Fair enough. I think this is a Yash Raj production. Looks it all the way in terms of its production qualities anyway. I want to know who that guy is. You know, he appears for very few seconds. This villain here looks very interesting in terms of his voice and that particular line that he says about something about ma'am. I don't know whether he's making a debut in this film, but certainly looks like someone I would like to see on the screen, and the big screen, of course, when the film comes out.
I'm also intrigued by the cinematography. It's very Gordon Willis, extremely play of light and shadow, so lends itself to that kind of noir treatment.
I can't believe I'm saying that, because the director of this film, that's Pradeep Sarkar, his last two movies were Lafange Parinde and Laga Chunri Mein Daag. Both were absolutely unbearable. But of course, this time, he may well be third time lucky.
Dada's back with a bang.
I hope so.
Let's see what he has to do this time.
Well, that was it for Trailer Talk. Of course, Midweek Happiness was one of the contests we held on Twitter. Here are the winners.
So that's a wrap as far as Friday Double Bill is concerned this week. But don't forget to tune in next week, where we're going to get you the bright and best from Bollywood, Hollywood and beyond.